We are making tremendous progress with this horrible disease that was sent over by China. China will pay a big price for what they did to the world and to us.
All right, that was President Trump in a taped address from the White House yesterday, blaming China for the coronavirus pandemic.
That's interesting. He back, of course, January 24th, actually tweeted his thanks to President Xi, saying how much he appreciated how transparent China had been. And on behalf of the American people, he just wanted to say, thank you, President Xi.
Joining us now, President of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. He's the author of the book, The World, A Brief Introduction. And also the host of Fareed Zakaria, GPS on CNN. Fareed Zakaria, he's out with the new book entitled 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World. It's great to have you both.
Great to have you both. Fareed, I'm especially grateful that you are here because Richard Haass has stopped paying me royalties for saying that the greatest insight of this pandemic has been that the pandemic did not change history. It just expedited trends, which actually was a great insight. But thank God you're here because we're now going to get 10 more critical insights on the new post-COVID world we're living in.
Well, Richard and I pay each other royalties all the time, so it all washes out.
Good. So tell us, Fareed, what are some of the most important lessons that we are learning from COVID, and how is it going to shape our world moving forward?
Well, I think one of the most central ones relating to what you were just talking about with Trump is it's very useful to understand our response to COVID by putting it in comparative perspective. So Trump says it's all about China, but look at a place like Taiwan. Taiwan is right next to China, gets millions of tourists from China every year, had its first COVID cases before the United States. Taiwan, with a population of 22 million, has had 7 COVID deaths. New York State, by comparison, has had 34,000, right? The problem has not been China or, where the virus came from. The problem has been our inept response. And, so to put it very bluntly, the problem is not China. The problem is Donald Trump. But it goes beyond Trump because for 4 decades now, we have had an attitude towards the federal government that said, as Ronald Reagan famously said, government is not the solution, it is the problem. Grover Norquist says, my goal is to get the federal government so small that I can take it into my bathtub, drown it. Steve Bannon says, I want to deconstruct the administrative state. Well, guess what? If your mission is to destroy, deconstruct, and drown the federal government, it's not going to perform so well during a pandemic. And that's, one of my lessons is it's not the quantity of government you have, but the quality of government you have. And the quality of American government has been shown in this pandemic to be very bad.
Well, let's talk about that point for one moment. It's the quality of government. And it reminds me, and Richard and I have talked about the Truman administration. Harry Truman was perhaps the last man that the establishment would have expected to carry on FDR's legacy and do it in such an extraordinary way. But the secret to Truman's success was he listened to Dean Acheson. He listened to George Kennan. He listened to George Marshall. He had Averell Harriman in Moscow. He had the best and the brightest of his time, and he listened. The quality of government was about as good as Truman could have wished for, and he followed their advice.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you think about the federal government of the United States in the 1940s, even in the 30s, Roosevelt's brain trust, the 40s, the 50s, Eisenhower continued this tradition. There was a real pride that people took in being in government. The federal government was fairly lean. It tried to do big things, but it did them in a very cost-effective way. The guy who ran the Marshall Plan famously said this is one of the first government programs to have come in under budget and wound itself down. That was the pride people took. You contrast that with now, and, all people talk about when they talk about the federal government is it's ineffective, it's inefficient, and yet we expect it to solve all these problems that we confront. So there's a huge mismatch between our ambitions for the government and the way we fund, organize, and exercise power through it. And that is, you know, as I say, Trump has a lot to do with it. This breed of Republicans has a lot to do with it. But it's even broader than that. We have to rethink. We've got to learn from this failure. One of the things I talk about in the book is the countries that have done well, from Taiwan to South Korea to New Zealand, even Germany, are countries that went through some failure and then learned from it and learned how to reorganize themselves, reorganize their states. We take the view that, you know, I mean, you listen to Donald Trump every day. It's America is perfect. America is beautiful. America is fantastic. It's very hard if you're intoxicated with that kind of American exceptionalism to learn anything.
Hey, Fareed, it's Willie. Congratulations on the book. I want to ask you about another of your points on the list, and that is inequality. That has been put into stark relief again over the last 7 months in terms of health care, in terms of education, in terms of people who have the means to leave cities, to leave hot spots where the virus is. Is that permanent in your eyes, and has history shown us that inequality does, in fact, deepen in these moments?
You know, it's a great point, Willie, and I have a very sad answer. It looks like the answer is yes, and it's going to get worse. There's so many ways to think about this, but if you look at the number of people who have lost their jobs, it is disproportionately the poorest, the most weak, the most vulnerable among us. Look, we're doing fine, right? And bankers are doing fine, and even doctors, while pressed, are doing fine. But the restaurant workers, the people who work in hotels, the people who work on cruise ships, all those industries have been destroyed. And you see that in the data. This is the first recession in 30 or 40 years. That's as far back as I looked, where the bottom 25% has just cratered. Most of the time, the top and the bottom lose jobs in a recession about the same amount. That's not true here. And you see it with companies, right? Amazon is thriving. The independent bookstores are in trouble. Walmart is thriving. The mom and pop hardware store is not. So these inequalities are becoming much, much greater. And in the face of this rising inequality, the fact that you have a Congress that is not willing to act, not willing to extend these benefits is crazy, because we will face, if this goes on, we're going to face a social revolution, because you are having structural changes which make inequality worse. You have these cyclical changes that are making it worse. And in Washington, they seem largely unconcerned.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.